Have you ever wondered if all the advice you're following to write your screenplay is wrong? Well, I believe it is, and it's holding you back. In fact, I know it is, because after following the same advice for 7 years, I decided to ignore it and completely start from scratch. And in a single week, I got through an entire draft of my screenplay. Not only that, but in a couple of months, I turned it into the best screenplay I've ever written. So today, I'm gonna give you the exact blueprint to finish your screenplay without getting stuck on every single word you write. And I'm gonna give you the step-by-step process to polish it up to a professional level. In this deep dive, you're gonna learn exactly what to focus on so you can start getting results like this.
It's been flowing better than it's been for years. I was actually having ideas and I was actually moving forward creatively, not just rehashing the same things or trying to figure out the best way to go forward.
You're probably wondering, is this even gonna work for me? This will work for people who actually wanna get their script across the finish line. No matter what stage you're at, whether it's an outline, a rewrite, or even if all you have is the idea, you're committed to getting this thing done. But if you're just watching this to pass the time, but you don't actually plan to write it, I don't think it's a good idea for you to keep watching. But how do I even know this works? Well, I just opened my brand new coaching program, Automatic Screenwriting, where I walk writers through this process step by step, and so far, they're already seeing improvements in their abilities to get words on the page. What's so good about this system is that it's the most sustainable one, because not only does it eliminate writer's block and procrastination and all the mental hurdles that come along with any type of creativity, but you're never gonna burn out. So with that in mind, what's the strategy we're gonna use to get your screenplay finished? Well, the first thing is, it's not gonna involve a meticulously crafted plan before you even write the thing. That can work, but the problem is that a lot of people just let this phase go on way too long, and it becomes an excuse to not even work on the actual screenplay. What I'm gonna have you do will be night and day compared to what you're usually told from most screenwriting advice. So let me ask you a question. If you want to become the best hopscotch player in the whole world, would you try learning by spending hours drawing the game onto the sidewalk? Or would you just get in and start playing? You'd do the second one, right? Because for the first one, you're not learning anything about the actual game. You know, I guess you'd have an amazing sense of what a hopscotch layout looks like, but you'd have no idea how the game works. The way people are often taught to write a screenplay is to plan every single idea before they even have the first page down. You know, to plan the plot structure, all the characters, and sometimes even the ending. The problem with this method is that you don't free yourself for any true creativity to come through. You know, like, you get sort of locked into this rigid blueprint for your script, and then when you start writing, you try to force everything into that mold. And then if you can't think of how to do it, you just stay there until you do. So you're not getting any experience actually writing the thing. You're getting a lot of experience perfecting your plan to write, but do you really just want to become an expert at outlining? If you want to become a great writer, you need to write as much as you can. Of course, there is a place for planning, and we're going to go into that. But is that really what you want to take the bulk of your time? So what I'm going to show you is how to jump into the actual enjoyable writing part of this as quickly as possible, how to use that to finish your draft faster than ever, and how to turn it into the best screenplay you've ever written. This is all just to pull you away from the outdated advice. I mean, this guy Eric sent me an email just to tell me that my videos alone have gotten him through 2 drafts. So basically, if you have an idea for a screenplay or you're stuck in a draft, do all this and you will get it across the finish line. And it's gonna be in a way that avoids all the relentless overthinking and stressing. Okay, so what's the first step to finishing your screenplay? Well, funny enough, it has almost nothing to do with writing itself. One of my clients had been working on their outline for about 2 years. You know, she had most of the plot points figured out, but she just couldn't come up with an ending that she liked. Because of this, she wasn't actually writing the screenplay itself. She wanted it to be perfect before she put it onto the page. And so we started working together, and I told her to stop worrying about the ending and just write. And then a few days later, I get a message from her about how much easier it's been for her to get this thing down onto the page. What we discovered is that the biggest problem was up here. Every writer struggles with self-doubt, procrastination, or imposter syndrome. So we need to fix that so you can avoid all these problems and actually finish your screenplay. So I'm going to tell you how to do it right now. I'm going to go a lot deeper into this than you're probably used to, but this is what works, so I have to include it. The first thing you have to do is this. You need to commit to finishing this one screenplay, to get to the finish line. It's just such a rewarding experience that very few writers actually get to have. But once you do, suddenly it seems so much less daunting because now you've got the confidence under your belt that says, wow, I can actually do this. And it won't be so terrifying the next time you start a new screenplay. Instead of driving blind, you'll be doing it with the knowledge that you are capable. All I want you to do is say to yourself, I'm going to finish this thing. That's the first step. The next thing you need to do, you're not gonna like, but it's crucial. The problem with writing a screenplay is all the other movies that are out there. You see things like The Shawshank Redemption or The Godfather, and then you look at your draft and think, man, look at this piece of junk. Who am I? Most, if not all, of the mental blocks we experience with writing is because of one thing: needing it to be good. You get an idea for something, but then you tell yourself, oh, no, that doesn't work. I can't write this. That's not good. And you just stop yourself from writing anything at all. Instead, I want you to make your goal to write a horrible screenplay. I know that sounds crazy, but if you can do that in your head, you're guaranteeing that you'll get words on the page. You're setting up these expectations that are pretty much impossible not to meet unless you do absolutely nothing. Because if you deliberately write badly, suddenly there is no writer's block. There's nothing to fear because now you want it to be bad. Now that huge thing that seems so scary before is literally what you want to be doing. What most of us forget is that Shawshank and The Godfather, they started out equally as horrible. So if you can manage your own need to be good and just embrace being bad, your mind will be in a much better position.
It's kind of like peeing your pants on purpose.
What?
Peeing your pants on purpose. You spend your whole life trying not to pee your pants. So letting go, peeing your pants on purpose, it's next to impossible.
How do you know this? Who would try that?
The next thing for your head that I think every writer under the face of the earth struggles with is that no one gets it. You're sitting alone at your desk in your basement working on this thing day in and day out, but you have no one to talk to about it. So just go online and join a community of writers. This could be a forum or Reddit or a Discord, whatever it is, because no one else is going to care who isn't also a writer. Now that you've sorted out your head, you need to do another thing that doesn't really involve screenwriting, and that is to learn how to distinguish between your left brain and your right brain. In case you didn't know which was left and right. What I mean by that is instead of worrying about your logical, analytical thoughts for your first draft, only focus on your creative, right brain thoughts. You'll know you're doing this right when you just sort of drop into a flow state and the right words just kind of spill out of you. I know you've experienced this before, but it's when you sit down to write for 15, 20 minutes and the next thing you know, it's been like 4 hours. The more often this happens, that is a sign that you're tapping into your raw creativity. One of my students came to me and said that she'd spend weeks just studying screenwriting, watching movies, whatever. But when it came to actually putting words on the page, she just couldn't do it. And then when I showed her how to identify between her left brain and her right brain thoughts, it was like a dam burst open because now things were just flowing from her every time she sat down to write. She stopped listening to the voices telling her that she wasn't good enough, and she just let her ideas onto the page. Like, okay, let's say you're in this creative stride and things are just flowing out of you, but then you have this weird, spontaneous idea like your character turned into a goat. I don't know. That's all your creative right brain, just having fun, doing what it wants. But then your analytical left brain comes in and tells you, no, that's ridiculous. You can't write that. You need to write something better. Now, okay, yeah, I'm being a little bit extreme with the goat example, but here's the point. When you're writing your first draft, you want to only be thinking with your right brain. Any idea you have for your story is from that creative part of your brain. But then anything that's critical, like nobody will get this, or what genre is this, or where's the 3-act structure, all of that is your logical, boring left brain. So what I want you to do is keep a piece of paper next to you when you're writing and write down any left brain thoughts that come to your mind. When you're writing a scene and you get an idea, if the next thought that comes up is "this is stupid," just write that down, because that awareness is the first step. Once you start to recognize what your recurring left brain thoughts are, just ignore them. Maybe it really is bad, but so what? That's your goal for this draft anyway, remember? If you were to ask me for the best writing advice in the world, do you want to know what I would tell you? You get it? Just write. So that's your first thing. Stop listening to your left brain thoughts. The next thing is, well, let's experiment here. I'm going to name some popular movies you might have heard of, and then I'm going to ask you a question afterwards. Get Out, Star Wars, Titanic, Shrek, Mean Girls, The Dark Knight. Hopefully some of these movies stuck out to you. The question I want to ask, which of them are movies that you love? For me, I could watch The Dark Knight and Get Out over and over and over again. But for you, it might be different movies on the list. It might even be none of them. Whichever one you thought of. The point is, everyone has a different taste in movies. When you decide to write your movie, it needs to be something that you love. Stop worrying about what somebody else might enjoy. Just focus on writing something that you genuinely love to write. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot easier to, well, not write it. If you just focus on entertaining yourself, ironically, it becomes a lot more likely that you'll entertain other people as well. And then finally, you have to stay focused. When you're in the middle of it and you're a quarter, maybe halfway through your story, it can be very easy to get what I call shiny screenplay syndrome. Between all the movies that you're watching, the music you're listening to, and just even the life that you're living, you'll probably get a bunch of ideas for another movie where you're like, oh my God, I need to go and write that. That is an amazing movie idea. But then the one that you're working on already gets pushed to the side, and then it just happens again with the next one, and you never get anything finished. I know I said this before, but that's because it is so important. Commit to finishing this one single screenplay. If you keep jumping from project to project, you'll just have a bunch of really good, halfway finished stories. And what would you rather have? A horrible, barely readable, completed draft, or an amazing story that you only got 40 pages into and then never looked at again? You can't edit a blank page, but you can edit a bad page. All right, so the next step is going to be the foundation for finishing your screenplay. It's going to be the make or break for your ability to get to the words fade out. It's honestly quite simple, and it works like this. Let's say you want to write 90 pages. That's it. That's how long it takes for your screenplay to feel finished. And you decide that you're going to write 1 page a day. Just 1 page. After 3 months of doing that, you're finished. If you dedicate maybe 10 minutes a day to writing your screenplay, you'll be able to do it that easily. That's kind of it. This is a weird thing though, because 10 minutes feels really insignificant. Like, if you're only able to dedicate 10 minutes a day to writing, why bother writing at all? I used to think this way, but then I started becoming aware of these little 10 to 20 minute windows in between tasks in my schedule where I was basically doing nothing at all. I'd clean my room or read a random book just to feel productive. So I decided to start using those windows to write. And it would only be for 10 to 20 minutes. That's it. At first, it felt silly, but I stuck with it. A month went by, 2 months, and eventually I had an entire screenplay written. So just find any gaps in your schedule where you're wasting time. Whether that means doom scrolling on TikTok or looking through your fridge for junk food, just use any opportunity you have to go work on your screenplay. The cool thing about this is that it creates a cycle because it starts to become a habit. You go from not writing at all to writing every single day. And as you start to see results, you feel motivated to start upping the numbers until you're doing a half hour or an hour a day. You just keep building it up. This part is very important though. For the entire time, you have to make sure you're actually writing. That means no studying about writing or wondering what to write next. These minutes have to be purely dedicated to actually putting words down on the page. That is the only way you'll make progress on your screenplay. You go from having no time to write to finding an extra 1 to 2 hours a week. So now that you're actually writing, we move on to the fourth step of this system. And This is a problem every single one of us deals with, and it's what makes screenwriting so hard. Imagine you were running a marathon, but along the way, there's a bunch of holes in the ground. Holes that if you run into, you're basically guaranteed to break your ankle. Knowing that this would probably stop you from reaching the finish line, you'd just avoid these holes. Wouldn't you like this common sense? Well, in the case of screenwriting, these holes are just anything you see or hear telling you that you can't make it as a screenwriter. Whether it's a nasty comment from your friend, or an Instagram meme making fun of you for not writing, or maybe it's a Reddit post complaining about how impossible the industry is now. I'm sure you know how painful it is to encounter any of these things, and yet instead of ignoring them or avoiding them, we just dive straight into them. I am guilty of this myself, but when you're constantly feeding into all these voices telling you that you can't do it or that it's too hard, you're choosing to discourage yourself. It's a lot easier to stop trying when you're under the impression that you're never going to make it. So the solution is just choose to be delusional. Sure, maybe Hollywood is in the worst state it's ever been in, but so what? If you really want to do this, you only have two options. You can either dwell in the fact that it's never going to happen for you and your chances are slim to none, or you can just do whatever you need to make your success inevitable. Look at it this way. Let's say things were the complete opposite and Hollywood was in the best state it's ever been. You know, spec scripts are being purchased left and right, and every movie in theaters is from an unknown, brand new writer. You're basically guaranteed a meeting with an agent, but you still have no confidence in your ability to succeed. Do you really think it's going to happen just by accident, by sheer convenience because it's so easy in this world? No. Do you know what the biggest difference is between the guys who don't make it in Hollywood and the guys who do? Their conviction. Quentin Tarantino didn't become Quentin Tarantino by accident. He made the decision to put as much energy as he could into his film career. And if you're still sitting here, saying to yourself, but it's so hard to make it, I get it. It's scary. It's hard to accept. I've been there. There's nothing wrong with you for thinking this way. But the fact is, you just need to go do it anyway. Because if you don't believe you can do this, you're not even going to try. But if you do, I can guarantee your odds of success will increase drastically. But if you're still scared and feel like you're going to have trouble internalizing this, I've got you. Remember earlier when I told you that your goals are the problem? Well, it's the same thing here. The reason you keep getting discouraged is because you're probably thinking about how hard it's going to be to get an agent or to find a producer when you haven't even finished your first draft. Maybe you can't convince yourself that you're going to sell your screenplay right now. That's totally fine. And it makes sense too if you don't have a finished one yet. Whatever stage you're currently at, just focus on the next step. So if you're writing an outline, focus on writing the first word of the actual draft. If you're revising it, focus on turning it into the best story you can. And then once you do finish it, do the same thing. Reach out to one industry contact at a time. Don't let each failed attempt discourage you. You might send 10, 20, even 100 emails. All you need is one. No producer is going to care or honestly even know about all the dozens of emails that you've sent before them. I'm going to tell you right now, you are going to feel insane for thinking this way, but it's the only way you'll finish your screenplay. J.K. Rowling was broke and got rejected 12 times before Harry Potter was published. Stephen King's first book was rejected 30 times before he made $400,000 for it once he got signed. And it's not because they're special or more talented than you, it's because they just decided to be delusionally optimistic about it. Here's the way I look at it. You want to write this thing either way. Whether it fails or succeeds, right now, you just want to get it on paper. So if you're going to write it no matter what happens, why not choose the train of thought that makes it easier for you? Who cares if it isn't true? You could argue, oh, if I don't sell it, there's no point in even writing it. Well, I got news for you. If the only reason you're writing this thing is because you want to make money from it, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Yes, that can be a reason, but you need to go deeper than that. So how do you do this? I used to struggle with this a lot. I would start a bunch of scripts in marketable, high concept genres just because I thought they'd sell better. But then I'd get halfway through and realize I didn't even like what I was writing, So I'd just give up on the thing and never look at it again, all because I was starting my screenplay from the frame of, how do I write this thing so that managers and producers actually want to work with me? There is a time and place for this, and I'll show you that soon. But first, just ask yourself, why do you want to write a screenplay specifically? Why is storytelling your passion? Get clear and use that answer as your motivation instead of just making a quick buck. Not only will it be easier to write, but it will come from such a pure place that it's going to be 10 times better than something that you're just writing for the money. The key is to not write anything to try and impress anyone else, but to just write something that you enjoy, knowing that the fact that you enjoy writing it is what will make it easier to make the best screenplay possible, because that's the real skill in any industry. If you're having fun with it, you're going to outlast all the people that hate what they're doing. So once you have the right motivations for this, it's time to take it to the next step. And this takes us back to actually writing something that could survive in this industry. Because as much as I believe in just writing whatever you want to write, the fact is certain genres will outperform other genres. But there's a way to do this right. You could just turn around and go, well, Terrifier 3 made $90 million on a $2 million budget, so obviously I need to go write a slasher film. If you enjoy slasher films and that's what you want to make, fine. But if you hate slashers and you just do it for that, odds are you're going to hate writing it, and you're going to end up writing a horrible film. What I like to do is go through the most successful films over the last 5 or 10 years. Not even in terms of overall box office numbers, just relative to their budget. Look at where you can find some consistency in a genre that you actually enjoy. So if you like psychological thrillers, go look at all the psychological thrillers that have blown up over the past decade. If you're into grounded dramas, go study the ones that broke through and became hits despite the low odds. Observe what's actually connecting with people. But here's the key. Don't just look at the surface level. Don't just say, oh, it's because this one had a crazy twist at the end. Go deeper than this. Watch the movies and ask yourself, how did this movie make me feel? And what stood out about this particular movie? And more importantly, which of these movies do I actually like and why? Whichever films you enjoy that make you lean in or get emotional, that's probably a clue for which movie you're meant to write. You don't just want to chase the market. You want to find where your personal taste overlaps with what's actually sellable. Once you notice the patterns, not just in where the money is, but what actually grabs you, you can use that as fuel for your screenplay. And if you do that well, you get the best of both worlds. A screenplay you actually care about and one that stands a real shot at getting made. Then you move on to the next step. You're probably asking yourself, okay, so how do I actually start writing my own screenplay? Remember earlier when I said your only goal is finishing this thing? We want to get to the writing part as quickly as possible. That means the planning process needs to be quick as possible. Look at Jackson Pollock. Do you think he sat around carefully planning every drop of paint, mapping out every line before he touched the brush? No. Jackson Pollock was famous for moving directly into the act of painting. He didn't make great paintings because of how well he planned them out. It was because he just did it. Screenwriting works the same way. You can sit around forever outlining your story, trying to plan a perfect script before you type a single word, but the script doesn't get better because you made a great outline. It's because you wrote the script. Too many screenwriters spend months perfecting the outline, thinking it'll make writing easier. But if writing is the part we love the most, why are we spending so much time trying to avoid it? Screenwriting is an art form, and just like any other, it comes from just picking up the brush and getting paint on the canvas. Or in this case, picking up the keyboard and getting words on the page, but you get the idea. But you do need to plan something. I mean, you probably shouldn't just start typing words and see what happens. So here's what I'd recommend. I like Stephen King's method because instead of outlining, he trusts what he calls the what if situation to drive the story, where he asks himself, well, what if this thing happened? And then he just writes it to find out. So when he was writing Misery, he probably said something like, what if a writer is held captive by his #1 fan? He didn't map everything out. He discovered it as he wrote. He describes it like uncovering a fossil, brushing the dirt away piece by piece, rather than building the story from a blueprint. So have a concept in your mind and then just start writing it. But now you're probably wondering, okay, but how am I supposed to use that to get me through the entire story? Well, that takes us back to Stephen King's book Misery, a writer held captive by his number one fan. The entire thing is basically a writer trapped in his number one fan's house. This concept takes them through the entire story. You have a writer who wants to get out of his number one fan's house, but then you have the number one fan who wants to keep the writer held captive. To write your screenplay, just let your character's goals lead the way. From beginning to end, give your character a goal and give him something that stops him from getting it, and then just watch him go after his goal. If you want some help with this, I built a ChatGPT bot to help you get everything in place you need to start writing your screenplay. And I know, if you're like me, you probably hear this and think, oh, you can't make art with AI. Are you out of your mind? That's not art. What is wrong with this? Is not to write your screenplay for you. It just asks you questions about what you already have to help you flesh out the most important aspects of your story. So let's say I have a premise and I say, I'm writing a story about a man who goes back in time to present modern technology to ancient civilizations. I just came up with that. Isn't that pretty cool? After I send it through, it helps me brainstorm some ideas. It asks questions about my main character, his goal, and his obstacles, whatever. And you can see it does it in a way that's still your story and stays true to what you're trying to tell. If you're interested in using this yourself, click the link down below to get it. But that's about all the planning you should be doing. This should take you no longer than, I don't know, a day or two. Anything beyond that, you're probably just overthinking. Your goal isn't to have this amazing concept right off the bat. Right now, you just want to get a finished draft. You can workshop it after, which brings me to the next step, because you might hear that and think it's not possible to write a screenplay without planning the plot out first. And I hear you. I used to be in the same exact boat for that too. But just pretend that's not the case for a second. Pretend you were comfortable just jumping in and writing your screenplay from scratch with no planning whatsoever. How do you think you would do that? Think of any movie ever. Toy Story, Batman, Pulp Fiction. What do you see? Are you remembering how amazing Batman's midpoint was, or the specific incident that served as Toy Story's catalyst? No! You're thinking about Batman interrogating the Joker, or Woody going head-to-head with Buzz Lightyear. Story does not come from your plot. Story comes from your characters creating the plot. It's called the hero's journey. Every step of that paradigm is a direct result of the character's actions. Whether it's the main character, a secondary character, even a side character, the plot points would not exist without them. The whole concept of hero's journey is rooted in your character's transformation as he goes after his goal. If you know your characters down to a T, they will write the story for you. They're going to naturally evolve through every scene if you can truly capture how they would all behave in certain situations. Odds are that you've watched hundreds of movies and read dozens of books. You have consumed so many different stories that you just subconsciously understand how to write a story from beginning to end. It's wired in our DNA. If you just sit down with your characters and your premise and start writing and don't stop, I promise you're going to figure out a way to get to the end of your story. And that brings me to the next step. This is something a lot of people who I work with come to me with. They tell me they know exactly what they want their screenplay to be about. You know, they have the characters, they have the plot structure down, whatever. But the problem is they're writing about a subject that they aren't knowledgeable about at all. Whether it's astrophysics, prehistoric civilizations, or pirates, they insist that they need to do more research. I'm going to tell you exactly what I tell each and every one of them. Skip the research. Just write what you can right now. Yes, you're going to get stumped. But as you write this thing, you'll quickly find that the nitty-gritty details of your concept are not where your story is. It's in your characters. If you just focus on your characters, they will still write the story for you. I mean, you don't even know what your story is yet. So you don't really know what you actually have to research. But instead of using research as an excuse to productively procrastinate, instead, you can use it more tactfully. I was writing a script about a musician. What I did was I just pumped out a draft stream of consciousness with the knowledge I already had. You can bet I had so many things wrong. But once I finished the draft, I just looked back at where I needed to learn, and I read books and watched videos about those specific aspects of the music industry. That was so much easier than reading every book known to man about it before I even knew what I even needed to understand. Write first, research later. Then what you need to do is move on to the next step. Actually writing the thing. You start writing, and at first it's a breeze. You get 5, 10, 20 pages through without a problem. But eventually you hit a snag. You're probably wondering, what do I do when I inevitably hit writer's block and I genuinely can't think of what to write next in my story? I mean, how do you keep going? I like to compare this to the SATs. Because when you're taking it, they tell you that if you get stuck on a question, the best thing to do is move on to the next question that you understand instead of spending hours on that one that you don't. Then come back to it later once you've finished all the other questions. When you're writing a screenplay, yes, you probably will get stuck. The last thing you want to do is agonize over one particular scene or a specific line of dialogue for days and weeks and just stay in that spot until you think of something genius. Just move to the next part of your story that you know. Even if you know it's not for another 30 pages, okay, say you have a character who goes to jail and he needs to escape, but for the life of you, you can't figure out how he does that. If you spend more than maybe 15 minutes trying to figure this out, just reduce the whole scene to a single sentence. He escapes from jail. That's it. You don't need to worry about the how. Your only goal is to get to the end of this thing. So when you write that one sentence, you can continue your story from the point after he escapes from jail. Then, once you've gone through the rest of your screenplay and you've figured out what happens afterwards, you come back to the scene. I promise you, once you have the rest of your story, it will be so much easier to think of something. The next step is something that I would say stumps 99% of screenwriters in the world, and that other 1%, we just don't like them very much. Remember earlier when I was talking about taking it one word at a time to just focus on the step right in front of you? Well, I haven't always been good at that. What I've found myself doing many times is going into a story with a particular concept or a particular theme in mind. But then I get to the actual writing part and ideas come to me that don't fit this specific mold. So rather than just rolling with it, I'd start saying to myself, well, this has nothing to do with the theme that I want the story to have, or this doesn't work with my climax. And because of that, all these ideas would come to me and I'd just shove them aside. But all this did was it just took me so much longer to get anything down. I can't emphasize this enough. For the first draft especially, I don't want you to think about anything other than the words that are right in front of you. If you finish a scene and then you have an idea for the next scene, just write the first thing that comes to you. Don't wonder whether it's good enough or if it's going to fit the theme you want this story to have or if it'll make sense with the climax. Just get it down. If you don't like it, you can take it out later. This is where true creativity will come in, when you allow the ideas that are naturally coming through to you to shine on the page. And I know that sounds all like hocus pocus, like let's be positive, but it's the truth. The best parts of your work are probably going to be the things that you didn't plan. It's the things that just came to you naturally because you turned off your rationally thinking brain and you just did what you wanted. Creativity is defined as the use of the imagination or original ideas. Logic and reasoning are not a part of raw creativity. Yeah, they come in once it's time to fix things up and make it coherent, but I know I've said it 5 times now, but I'm going to say it again. This is your first draft. Your goal is not to make it perfect. It's not even to make it good. It's just to make it. And I'm going to drop a bar now. Done is always better than perfect because perfect never gets done. If your goal is to make your screenplay absolutely perfect, you're never going to reach that. And all of this is what moves you into what I call the promised land. This is the ultimate place for you to end up, where you have a finished first draft. Just something that you wrote that you got to the end of. It's going to be sloppy. It's not going to be very coherent because that's where the fun starts. That's where you can start revising this thing and turn it into the amazing, polished draft that you know you're capable of writing. And If you want me to walk you through exactly how to do this step by step, click the link below. I will show you how to fix your dialogue, refine your theme, and get your plot all refined to a professional level. So if you think that sounds like something that's going to help you, click the link below and I'll see you there.